Welcome to Paranormal Files. I'm your host, Zoe Parker, and in today's episode, we journey deep into the Utah desert, where a stretch of desolate land hides a terrifying reputation. For decades, it's been a hotbed of unexplained phenomena: U.F.O. sightings, mutilated cattle, portals in the sky, creatures that defy biology, and whispers of something ancient that watches from the shadows. Locals say it's cursed. Scientists call it unexplainable. But many believe it is something far darker. This is the story of Skinwalker Ranch. The area now known as Skinwalker Ranch is located in northeastern Utah, within the Uinta Basin, a rugged stretch of desert flanked by cliffs and distant mountains. It spans roughly 500 acres, remote and isolated, bordered by rusting barbed wire and red rock. Long before it was a hotspot for paranormal investigation, the land was steeped in legend. For the Ute tribe, this place was no ordinary hunting ground. It was, according to oral tradition, a forbidden zone, territory cursed by malevolent beings known as skinwalkers. The term skinwalker comes from Navajo folklore. In traditional stories, a skinwalker is a powerful witch, one who can shapeshift into animals, often wolves, coyotes, or birds, and uses their powers for dark purposes. These beings are feared, not just for their supernatural abilities, but for their capacity to inflict illness, death, and mental torment. Among the Ute, it is believed that skinwalkers still roam this part of the desert, especially near certain rock formations and old trails. According to legend, the land itself was cursed during a tribal conflict centuries ago, and that curse remains embedded in the soil. When settlers arrived in the late 1800s, they too reported odd occurrences: strange lights at night, livestock vanishing without a trace, and eerie sounds echoing across the desert with no visible source. But these reports were largely ignored or dismissed as frontier superstition. For most of the 20th century, the area was privately owned and kept out of public view. That changed in 1994, when a family known as the Shermans purchased the ranch. Their dream was to raise cattle and live a quiet rural life. Instead, they found themselves in the center of something terrifying. Within months of moving in, they began witnessing lights in the sky, massive black triangles hovering silently overhead, and orbs that seemed to stalk their livestock. Their cattle were found mutilated in surgical fashion, organs missing without any blood spilled. Large, unidentifiable tracks would appear in the snow, only to vanish mid-trail. And at night, the sounds, howls, voices, guttural growls, would circle the house, growing louder and closer without ever revealing their source. The Shermans tried to document what they could, but the phenomena defied logic and consistency. Some nights were calm, others felt like a siege. They spoke of a creature with glowing red eyes that was immune to bullets, and of voices speaking in strange mechanical languages near the treetops. Their dogs refused to go near certain areas of the property, whining and digging at the door to get inside. After 2 years of escalating terror, the Shermans had had enough. They sold the ranch to a man named Robert Bigelow, a wealthy businessman with a keen interest in the paranormal. With that sale, Skinwalker Ranch would step out of rural obscurity and into national focus. The earliest documented encounters at Skinwalker Ranch began to surface in the mid-1990s, shortly after the Sherman family arrived. From the moment they moved in, strange things began happening. Not just odd, but deeply unsettling. One of the first incidents involved an enormous wolf. Not a regular-sized animal, but a creature far larger than any wolf native to North America. According to Terry Sherman, the wolf was so large that its back reached the top of his 6-foot fence. Strangely, it seemed calm, even friendly at first. It approached Terry's family without aggression and allowed them to pet it. But moments later, it lunged into a corral and clamped its jaws around the leg of a calf. Terry and his father tried to drive it off, first by beating it with sticks, then by shooting it point blank with a Magnum handgun. According to their account, the bullets had no effect. The wolf simply looked back at them, unfazed. After several more shots, it finally let go and walked off into the brush. Terry followed it, tracking its large, deep paw prints through the mud, until suddenly, the prints just stopped. There were no signs of a struggle, no blood, no broken branches. The massive animal had simply vanished into thin air. This was only the beginning. In the weeks that followed, glowing orbs began appearing above the fields. One was described as a floating ball of blue light, about the size of a basketball, moving silently just above the ground. When the family's dogs gave chase, the orb lured them into the trees. Minutes later, the Shermans heard horrific yelping. When they searched the area, they found only 3 scorched, greasy patches on the ground. The dogs were gone, reduced to nothing but residue. Terry reportedly never spoke of the incident again. Another disturbing event occurred when the Shermans discovered a prized cow lying dead in the field. But this was no normal death. The animal's body was completely drained of blood, and several organs had been removed with surgical precision. There were no tracks, no signs of struggle, and no predators in sight. The incisions were clean, almost as if made by a laser. Similar mutilations followed, always without any sign of how the killer entered or exited the property. One night, Terry saw what he described as a large, dark creature perched in a tree. It had huge claws and glowing red eyes, silently watching him from above. He fired at it with a high-powered rifle, and again, the creature simply vanished. Later, he found deep claw marks on the bark, gouged into the wood at least 10 feet above the ground. The Shermans were ranchers, not storytellers. They began recording their encounters in detail, hoping to find patterns, explanations, or even proof that they were not losing their minds. The local community began to take notice. Rumors spread about the strange goings-on at the ranch, and journalists from nearby towns tried to investigate. Some were allowed onto the property, and many came away shaken. One reporter wrote that the area felt wrong, as if the land itself was watching. Even those who visited during the day spoke of intense dread, unexplained mechanical hums, and a sense of being observed from all directions. Whatever haunted Skinwalker Ranch was not confined to one form or one phenomenon. It shifted, adapted, and escalated, and for the Shermans, it became a living nightmare. When Robert Bigelow acquired the ranch in 1996, the paranormal world took notice. Bigelow, a Las Vegas real estate mogul and founder of the National Institute for Discovery Science, often referred to as NIDS, was already known for funding serious investigations into fringe science and unexplained phenomena. He purchased the property not to debunk the stories, but to study them. What followed was one of the most well-funded, prolonged, and bizarre paranormal investigations in American history. NIDS stationed a team of scientists, physicists, and former military personnel on the ranch full-time. Surveillance equipment was installed across the property: cameras, motion detectors, electromagnetic sensors, and infrared monitors. Their goal was simple: capture hard data. Record the phenomena. Measure what had previously only been anecdotal. But from the beginning, the ranch resisted being observed. In one incident, a series of motion-detecting cameras set up on poles began malfunctioning. One night, power was lost to an entire row of devices. When the team inspected the area the next morning, they found that heavy cabling, bolted to the poles, had been meticulously ripped out. Not torn or damaged, but carefully dismantled, as if by someone who knew how the equipment worked. No footprints, no tool marks, no indication of who or what had done it. The strange intelligence behind the phenomena seemed aware of the investigators, and a step ahead of them at every turn. One of the more disturbing cases occurred when an NIDS biologist was observing the cattle herd. As he watched through binoculars, a calf suddenly collapsed. When the team reached the animal, they found it had been mutilated, its eye socket cored out, its rectal area removed, again with surgical precision. There was no blood, no signs of struggle. The time between the collapse and their arrival was less than 10 minutes. The investigators had been watching from only a few hundred yards away. Another researcher reported seeing a strange tunnel of light open in midair, like a rip in the fabric of reality. He described a humanoid figure crawling out of the opening, dropping to the ground and running off into the darkness. When the team rushed to investigate, they found nothing, but electromagnetic sensors in the area had spiked, and motion-activated cameras had failed to capture any image. Some team members experienced personal effects, feelings of intense fear, sudden nausea, and even temporary paralysis. Others heard mechanical noises underground, like gears or engines buried beneath the soil. They also recorded strange frequencies on audio equipment, sounds that resembled human speech but were unintelligible, like a language that did not belong on Earth. Despite years of study and a wealth of testimony, the NIDS team gathered very little in the way of concrete proof. What they documented instead was a kind of paranormal intelligence that seemed reactive, selective, and impossible to predict. It would perform, disappear, and return only when it chose to. Their instruments would fail at crucial moments. Their cameras would capture nothing. It was as if the ranch itself refused to be exposed. In 2004, Bigelow shut down NIDS, citing frustration with the elusive nature of the phenomenon. He retained ownership of the ranch, but research slowed. Still, those who had worked there came away changed. Many believed they had been in the presence of something far beyond ghosts or aliens, something that defied every framework they had, something that watched back. Over the years, theories attempting to explain the phenomena at Skinwalker Ranch have multiplied, each more unsettling than the last. Some lean heavily into folklore, others into speculative science, and some suggest something even more cosmic in nature. Yet none have managed to offer a definitive answer. Among the earliest explanations was the belief that the land itself is cursed, echoing the Ute legend of skinwalkers. In this view, the bizarre activity is not caused by outside forces, but by something buried deep in the spiritual fabric of the land. An ancient malevolence that predates modern memory. This theory is bolstered by the consistent reports of shape-shifting entities, inhuman voices, and an almost predatory intelligence that targets those who get too close. Another prevailing theory focuses on interdimensional portals. Witnesses, including scientists from the NIDS team, have described lights opening mid-air like windows into another world. One physicist claimed to have watched a glowing tunnel rotate into view above the mesa, followed by a dark creature emerging from its depths. These accounts suggest that Skinwalker Ranch may be situated on some kind of rift, an area where the boundaries between dimensions are thin, allowing entities or energies to bleed through into our reality. Then there is the alien hypothesis. Many of the encounters, especially the flying objects, glowing orbs, and mutilated cattle, mirror those from classic UFO cases. Some researchers argue that extraterrestrials are conducting surveillance or biological research on the property. The precision of the mutilations, the total lack of blood, and the absence of footprints have all been cited as evidence of advanced, non-human technology. Still others point toward time-related anomalies. Witnesses have described losing time, seeing the sky shift color, or hearing sounds that seem disconnected from the present moment. Theorists suggest that some sort of temporal distortion may occur in this area, creating pockets where time loops, accelerates, or freezes. This could explain why creatures appear and vanish instantly, or why massive objects move without a trace. Skeptical scientists have offered more grounded explanations: optical illusions, magnetic anomalies, or mass hysteria brought on by isolation and fear. But even these theories struggle to account for the volume and variety of the events, especially when experienced by trained professionals over months or years. The magnetic field in the Uinta Basin does show irregularities, and certain rocks emit low-frequency vibrations, which could influence perception. Yet these factors alone do not explain glowing entities, disembodied voices, or mutilated livestock. Some have even proposed that the ranch is a kind of spiritual testing ground, an intersection between the physical and metaphysical, where the boundaries of belief, fear, and reality are deliberately manipulated. In this framework, the phenomena are not meant to be understood in scientific terms, but experienced as part of a larger, unknowable system. The ranch becomes a mirror, reflecting whatever you bring with you, amplifying it, distorting it, and turning it back on you in ways you never expected. Whether it is aliens, demons, interdimensional creatures, or the very land itself awakening, one thing is clear. The phenomenon resists explanation because it may not be a single thing. It may be many things, acting in concert, or something else entirely, beyond human language or comprehension. Skinwalker Ranch is not just haunted. It is inhabited by something that rewrites the rules the moment you think you understand them. In the years following the NIDS investigation, Skinwalker Ranch remained relatively quiet in the public eye. But the silence did not mean the phenomena had stopped. Reports continued to surface, local residents speaking of lights in the sky, strange animal behavior, and technology malfunctioning in ways no one could explain. In 2016, the story entered a new phase when the property was sold again, this time to a Utah-based real estate magnate named Brandon Fugel. Unlike previous owners, Fugel initially kept his identity hidden. But what made this acquisition different was what came next. Brandon Fugel reopened the ranch to active investigation, this time bringing in a new team of scientists, engineers, and security personnel under a corporate research initiative. The team installed state-of-the-art surveillance systems, including high-definition cameras, motion sensors, radio frequency monitors, and seismic detectors. They also began keeping detailed logs of every anomaly, with a focus on transparency and long-term documentation. Almost immediately, they encountered resistance. Drones malfunctioned over specific areas of the property. Batteries drained within minutes. Laptops shut down unexpectedly. Even satellite connections would flicker or drop when pointed at certain parts of the mesa. One camera installed to record 24 hours a day captured a full system shutdown at the exact moment a glowing object passed overhead. When the team reviewed the footage, they found a gap, seconds of missing data, with no explanation for how the equipment had failed. Researchers also began experiencing physical symptoms. One team member suffered sudden swelling of the scalp after standing near an area known as the Triangle, a location infamous for erratic electromagnetic activity. Others reported migraines, nausea, and short-term memory loss after prolonged exposure to specific zones. Radiation detectors spiked without warning, only to return to normal within minutes. The symptoms were not imagined. They were recorded, verified, and medically documented. In one chilling event, a team of observers noticed a glowing object in the sky moving against the wind. As they followed it with thermal imaging, they saw what appeared to be a cold void, a black shape with no heat signature, hovering above the ground. Livestock nearby became agitated, refusing to eat or move. Days later, one of the cows collapsed and died without clear cause. No signs of trauma, no illness, and again, no blood. The ranch's surveillance team also picked up strange light sources deep in the sky, some of which hovered motionless for hours. Others blinked in patterns resembling code, yet did not match any known aircraft signatures. Radio signals have been intercepted, carrying sequences that appear structured, repeating pulses, odd modulations, and tones that fall outside normal frequencies. Some believe these are attempts at communication. Others fear they are warnings. Perhaps the most disturbing change in recent years has been the frequency of phenomena. Events that once occurred sporadically now seem to increase in both number and intensity. The more the team investigates, the more the ranch responds. New anomalies appear where none had before. Even seasoned researchers have begun expressing unease, suggesting that whatever intelligence exists on the property is not only aware of them, it may be evolving. As this new chapter unfolds under constant monitoring and public scrutiny, Skinwalker Ranch has become more than a local legend. It is now a living laboratory for the unexplained. And yet, with all the technology, data, and expertise applied, one thing remains unchanged. No one truly understands what is happening. The ranch continues to observe, react, and mystify on its own terms. As the legend of Skinwalker Ranch has grown, so too has its influence beyond the borders of Utah. What began as a local tale of haunted land has evolved into a cultural touchstone, a symbol of the unknown that taps into deep psychological fears and fascinations. The ranch is no longer just a place, it is an idea, one that represents the boundary between reality and something else, something far stranger. Within the nearby Uinta Basin, the effects have been profound. Locals report generational stories of encounters. Parents, children, and grandparents, all with their own accounts of lights, creatures, and shadows that move with intent. For many who live near the ranch, the phenomena are not something to question. They are simply part of life. Residents often avoid speaking openly about what they have seen, not from disbelief, but from fear of ridicule. Still, whispers continue of men in black visiting homes, of electronics shorting out during thunderstorms, of animals vanishing from locked pens without a sound. Some families have left the area altogether, saying the constant anxiety became too much. Others have stayed, forming a kind of uneasy coexistence with the strange forces at play. Nighttime routines include drawing curtains, locking doors early, and keeping lights on until sunrise. It is not just about protecting the body. It is about guarding the mind, the sense that reality itself can shift, that your surroundings are not what they seem, weighs heavily on those who live in its shadow. Pop culture has embraced Skinwalker Ranch with fervor. The story has inspired documentaries, fictional films, and an ongoing television series that follows the latest investigations. Online forums and social media have turned it into a digital phenomenon where new theories are proposed daily, and every blurry photograph becomes potential evidence. It has become a myth for the modern world, one supported not just by rumors, but by data, funding, and firsthand testimony. Psychologically, the ranch taps into something primal: the fear of being watched, the fear of the unseen, the idea that something intelligent and unknowable is observing us, interfering in ways just subtle enough to remain unprovable. It reflects our deepest unease, that we are not alone, not in a comforting sense, but in a cold, analytical one. That whatever is out there is not interested in revealing itself, only in reminding us how powerless we are to understand it. This fear is amplified by the ranch's unpredictability. Unlike haunted houses or classic ghost stories, Skinwalker Ranch does not follow rules. It does not offer patterns or explanations. What appears as a UFO one day may manifest as a mutilated cow the next. Lights in the sky may be followed by voices underground. It shifts forms, refuses labels, and punishes those who try to define it. For those who have worked on the ranch, scientists, investigators, even hardened military personnel, the emotional toll can be severe. Reports of nightmares, paranoia, and strange illnesses have followed some long after they left. Others refuse to speak publicly, citing legal agreements or personal fear. The few who do talk often struggle to describe what they experienced. Their language becomes abstract, talking of presence, pressure, distortion. It is not just what they saw, but what they felt, as if their minds were being bent, reshaped, or pulled towards something not meant for human understanding. What began as curiosity has become a cautionary tale, a place that invites exploration but punishes expectation, a modern myth that refuses to fade. Skinwalker Ranch does not just defy explanation, it rejects it. Across decades of stories, scientific investigations, and cultural obsession, Skinwalker Ranch has produced a mosaic of disturbing and unexplainable events. Though no single narrative can account for everything that has unfolded there, certain moments stand out, threads that, when woven together, reveal just how deeply the mystery runs. There is the giant wolf that shrugged off gunfire, walking calmly into the brush as if it could not be harmed by human weapons. The creature's impossible size and vanishing tracks remain one of the first indicators that something unnatural was at work. Then there are the blue orbs, intelligent, hovering lights that moved with purpose. One of them reportedly led the Sherman's dogs into the woods, only to leave behind 3 burned, greasy patches and no trace of the animals. In a matter of minutes, living creatures were reduced to scorched earth, with no sign of a predator. Cattle mutilations have occurred repeatedly, always with surgical precision, always bloodless. Organs are removed with no trauma to surrounding tissue, and bodies are found in open fields without tracks or disturbances in the dirt. Even in cases where the team is observing from nearby, the killings occur silently and in an impossibly short window of time. These are not the acts of scavengers or natural predators. Something else is at play, something methodical. One scientist described seeing a portal open above the ground, a spinning vortex of yellow light. Through it, he claimed, came a figure crawling on all fours before vanishing into the darkness. Another investigator recorded a sudden burst of radiation near his head that left physical burns and swelling on his scalp. Cameras aimed directly at glowing aerial anomalies have shorted out or failed completely, suggesting not just coincidence, but deliberate interference. Then there are the unexplained voices, heard in empty fields, coming from treetops, speaking in mechanical, guttural tones that match no known language. Audio recordings have picked up these sounds, though the patterns defy analysis. Some describe them as warnings. Others believe they are simply observing, watching from behind a veil. Many visitors speak of a psychological effect that begins the moment they step onto the land. Feelings of unease, dizziness, or dread are common. Equipment fails not because it is defective, but as if something does not want to be seen. And those who try to study the phenomena often become the subject of the experience themselves. Researchers become the observed. The closer one looks, the more the ranch seems to push back. These moments are not isolated. They form a pattern, not in logic, but in atmosphere. Each event reinforces the sense that the ranch is alive in some way. Not conscious in the way humans understand, but reactive, responsive. The land appears to have rules, but they shift without warning. Boundaries exist, but they are invisible and ever-changing. Despite years of investigation, high-tech monitoring, and global attention, not a single theory has been able to encompass all that has been witnessed. Skinwalker Ranch is not one mystery. It is a convergence of mysteries, a place where fear becomes tangible and the laws of nature seem to bend under an invisible weight. The cumulative evidence does not offer answers. It offers tension, a pressure that builds with every encounter, every silence, every story told by those brave or unlucky enough to spend time on the ranch. If the events at Skinwalker Ranch cannot be neatly categorized, then perhaps they must be understood through speculation, not as science demands, but as the human mind attempts when faced with the unknown. What if the ranch is not merely haunted, but a kind of sentient landscape? A living intelligence embedded in the geography, not bound by form or time, one that reveals itself through symbols, fear, and illusion. What if the anomalies are not malfunctions of nature, but messages, encoded through mutilations, distortions, and disappearances? Some researchers have proposed that Skinwalker Ranch functions as a kind of observational point, not for humans, but for something else, something older. What if this place is a kind of zoo enclosure, but in reverse? We are the animals being watched, measured, tested. The glowing orbs, the shifting entities, the inexplicable portals. Perhaps they are instruments, not designed to harm necessarily, but to understand. And our suffering, confusion, or fear may be unintended consequences or part of the process. There is also the possibility that what is happening is not paranormal at all, but hypernormal, something that has always existed, just beyond our senses. If human perception is limited by biology, then perhaps Skinwalker Ranch is a place where that veil is thinnest, a place where what is normally hidden leaks through. That would explain the shifting forms, the conflicting phenomena, the sense of being in a dream that reacts to emotion and observation. It is not that the ranch changes. It is that we change when we are there. What if time itself is fractured on the property? Some witnesses describe seeing objects from the past or events that have not yet happened. Perhaps the ranch is a temporal fault line where moments bleed into each other and entities are not bound by linear progression. In that case, the creatures seen may not be aliens, spirits, or animals, but travelers. Pieces of another timeline colliding briefly with ours. Or maybe the ranch is a ritual site. Not in the traditional sense of religion, but in the spiritual architecture of the earth itself. A kind of natural temple, built not with stone, but with gravity, magnetic fields, and silence. It might serve as a gateway, a fixed point where energies converge. Cultures around the world have long described thin places, spots where the barrier between worlds is weak. Skinwalker Ranch could be one of those rare locations where intent and belief shape reality, and where the act of observation invites participation. These possibilities, while unnerving, offer no resolution. That is part of the power Skinwalker Ranch holds. It resists the comfort of answers. It does not fit into any one framework because it may not exist in just one framework. It is simultaneously a location, an event, and an experience. And no matter how much equipment is brought in or how many hours of footage are recorded, the ranch always seems to remain just out of reach. To speculate on Skinwalker Ranch is to admit that some questions are bigger than the tools we have. It is to entertain the idea that mystery is not a flaw in our understanding, but a feature of something larger, something that does not wish to be solved, only remembered. And for every camera failure, every vanishing track, every unblinking orb of light, The ranch whispers one possibility louder than all the rest. What if we are the anomaly? And what if this place is simply revealing the truth we were never meant to see? There is a silence that surrounds Skinwalker Ranch, a silence that feels deliberate. For all the lights, creatures, and voices reported there, what lingers most is the absence of finality. Every camera failure, every vanishing footprint, every burnt patch of ground seems carefully curated to keep us guessing. It is not just that the ranch eludes explanation. It is that it seems to demand belief while punishing certainty. Those who approach it with skepticism leave disturbed. Those who arrive as believers leave doubting everything, even themselves. The unanswered questions stack like stones. Why do certain parts of the ranch produce spikes in radiation, then return to normal? Why are animals mutilated with surgical precision, yet never caught on camera? Why do orbs of light interact with people, observing, luring, reacting, yet leave no trace on the most advanced equipment? Why are human minds affected so deeply and so differently in the same place? Some see monsters, others see machines, some hear nothing, others hear voices speaking in alien tongues. Perhaps this is what the ranch truly is, a reflection, not just of the unknown, but of us, of how we respond when logic fails and control slips away. It is a place where belief becomes dangerous, where doubt is just as disorienting, and where the veil between what is real and what is not collapses with frightening ease. Every story told about the ranch reveals more about the people who tell it than the phenomenon itself. Still, the legends persist. New owners continue the research. Surveillance towers now loom over the mesa. Infrared grids and motion detectors blink into the night. Scientists take notes, cameras roll. And yet, the strange events not only continue, they evolve. The ranch adapts. It changes shape. It learns. What Skinwalker Ranch represents is not just the paranormal. It is the edge of understanding, the place where certainty dies and something older takes its place. The land watches. The phenomena respond. And those who walk its soil often leave with less than they arrived with. Less certainty, less clarity, less comfort. In the end, it may not be about solving the mystery at all. It may be about realizing that some places are not meant to be solved. Some doors, once opened, do not lead back. And some knowledge, no matter how badly we want it, only leaves us staring deeper into the unknown. Thanks for listening. This has been Paranormal Files. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you'd like to support the show, gain access to bonus content, and unlock our entire library of video podcasts, subscribe to the Forbidden Knowledge Network on Patreon. Subscribe now.